Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into the world of Somala? Released on March 2024, this film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're uncovering every thrilling detail. If you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us grow. And for more incredible movie explorations and hidden gems, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's unravel the magic behind this cinematic masterpiece. On a stormy evening in March 2024, Somala hit the big screen, and within hours, it was impossible to ignore the chilling wave of conversation that followed. A haunting blend of supernatural horror, psychological terror, and human tragedy. This film quickly spiraled into a cultural phenomenon that left both critics and audiences alike mesmerized. Directed by Rizal Mantovani, Somala became more than just a horror movie. It was an exploration of grief, desperation, and the dangerous forces that emerge when human longing goes unchecked. The story of Somala begins with a dark promise, a pact sealed with an ancient and malevolent entity, setting the stage for one of the most unsettling films to emerge in recent years. What makes this film stand out from the sea of supernatural thrillers and ghost stories is not just its eerie premise or gruesome visuals, but the deep emotional layers that underlie its every scene. In a world where many horror films rely heavily on jump scares and gore, Somala takes a more calculated approach, combining dread, suspense, and the slow unraveling of a tragic story that is, at its core, human. Set against the backdrop of Indonesia's urban legend from Semarang, Somala tells the tale of Salastri, Luna Maya, and her husband, Sojiman, Darius Sanathria, a couple desperate to have children. For years, their lives are shadowed by an overwhelming sense of emptiness as their attempts to conceive are in vain. In their desperation, they seek out a mysterious supernatural solution, a deal with a demon that promises to fulfill their deepest desire. This pact, however, comes with a heavy price, one they could not possibly foresee. The birth of their children, twins, is marred by tragedy, as one child dies under mysterious circumstances, and the other, Kamala, lives to carry the weight of the darkness that was forced upon her. From this moment, the film descends into a spiral of horrific events that will test the very boundaries of what it means to love, sacrifice, and be haunted by one's choices. As Kamala grows up, her life becomes a reflection of the horrors that surround her. Abused and neglected by her parents, who refuse to acknowledge the consequences of their actions, Kamala's pain and suffering are visceral. She is a victim of the cruelty of the world around her, a world that never stops to consider the silent damage caused by desperate decisions. From the classroom bullying she endures to the oppressive patriarchy that denies her a voice, Kamala's life is one of silent suffering. This makes her eventual transformation into Somala, the vengeful spirit, all the more heartbreaking. She is not just a ghostly presence. She is a symbol of rage, grief, and the unjust consequences of an unacknowledged past. What makes Somala truly remarkable is its ability to marry supernatural horror with social commentary. The film is not just about a haunting. It's about the toxic, destructive forces that shape human lives, often unnoticed, until it's too late. The supernatural elements, though unsettling and visually arresting, serve as a metaphor for the much deeper issues the characters face. The tension builds around the unraveling of Salastri and Sojiman's relationship, the guilt that gnaws at them, and the gradual realization that they cannot escape the consequences of their actions. Their desperation leads to a nightmare they can't wake from, and Somala makes us all realize that sometimes, the worst horrors are the ones we bring upon ourselves. The film's casting deserves special mention. Luna Maya's portrayal of Salastri is nothing short of captivating. She conveys a woman torn between love and desperation, caught in the unbearable agony of her own choices. Her performance is raw and emotional, making the audience feel the weight of her actions. Darius Sanathria complements Maya perfectly as Sojiman, portraying a man who is both loving and weak, driven to the edge by his own sense of inadequacy. Together, they breathe life into this tragic couple, whose decisions will ultimately destroy them. But it's the transformation of Kamala into Somala that steals the show. Played by Michaela Rose Hilly, the character of Kamala is a heartbreaking figure. As Kamala ages, the torment she suffers is visually palpable. Hilly brings depth and nuance to the role, making Kamala's eventual transformation into the vengeful Somala all the more poignant. When Kamala becomes Somala, she is no longer just a victim but a force of nature, an unstoppable tide of fury, vengeance, and sorrow. The chilling moments in which Somala haunts those who wronged her are disturbingly satisfying, and the film's darker, more violent scenes feel earned rather than gratuitous. Somala isn't just a film of haunting images and jump scares. While it certainly delivers on both fronts, it's also a meditation on the human condition, on the darker impulses of the soul and the destructive power of unheeded desires. It's a slow burn that immerses the audience in its world of supernatural dread and emotional turmoil, drawing them into a narrative that is as much about personal damnation as it is about the spirits that haunt us. The film challenges us to reflect on the consequences of our choices, the ways in which we harm others, and how even the most innocuous decisions can spiral into something much darker. The visuals in Somala are haunting, to say the least. Every frame feels meticulously designed to amplify the tension and atmosphere, with the cinematography echoing the film's sense of foreboding. The shadowy corners of the house, the flickering lights that seem to move with a life of their own, and the unsettling silence that often accompanies Kamala's suffering. All these elements build a visual language that speaks as much to the story as the dialogue does. The color palette shifts from muted earth tones to stark contrasts, emphasizing the growing divide between the world of the living and the spectral realm where Somala resides. This blend of visuals and atmosphere turns the setting into a character in its own right, an ever-present reminder that something terrible is always lurking in the shadows. At its heart, Somala is a story of transformation. It's about how tragedy can shape us, how it can break us, and how, in some cases, it can turn us into something unrecognizable. Somala's transformation from a vulnerable child to a vengeful spirit is not just a plot device. It's a metaphor for the ways in which trauma can distort and twist the human psyche. The film doesn't just rely on scares to unsettle its audience. It creates a world that feels just as broken as Kamala herself, a world that reflects the deep emotional and physical wounds inflicted upon her. The pacing of Somala is deliberate, and while it may seem slow to some, it's this careful buildup of suspense and dread that gives the film its power. Every scene seems to pull you deeper into the story, making it impossible to look away. You can feel the inevitable collision of past sins and present suffering coming, and when it finally arrives, the catharsis is both terrifying and satisfying. It's a slow, deliberate burn that leaves you contemplating the film long after the credits roll. What also makes Somala so extraordinary is its cultural resonance. While supernatural horror has always been popular, Somala taps into specific cultural fears and urban legends from Semarang, Indonesia, giving it a sense of authenticity that many other horror films lack. This not only elevates the film's story but also makes it feel grounded in real-world emotions and fears. The folklore that drives Somala is deeply rooted in Indonesian culture, and the film doesn't shy away from exploring the impact of these stories on the characters. It's a film that resonates on a cultural level, making the horror feel more personal and immediate. As Somala became more than just a film, becoming a touchstone for conversations about horror and tragedy, it sparked a cultural moment, with people around the world diving into its layers, analyzing every twist, performance, and visual detail. Its success was a testament to its emotional depth and terrifying narrative. People weren't just scared by it, they were moved by it. The combination of gripping performances, a heartbreaking plot, and an atmosphere of mounting dread made Somala a movie that viewers couldn't easily forget. Somala's success is proof that horror can be more than just a genre of screams and scares. It can be a powerful medium for exploring deep human emotions, fears, and the consequences of our actions. It's a film that stays with you long after you've watched it, leaving an indelible mark on your mind. If you haven't experienced Somala yet, now is the time to dive deep into this haunting, unforgettable film. Somala opens with an air of unease that grips you from the very first scene. We are introduced to Salastri, Lunamaya, and Sojiman, Darius Sanathria, a couple bound by love but shackled by years of heartbreak. Their faces, etched with sorrow and longing, immediately tell a story, one of quiet desperation. They've tried everything to conceive, from fertility treatments to alternative therapies. Yet still, the dream of having a child slips further away. Their yearning for a child becomes an obsession, something that begins to eat at their souls, a driving force that leads them to take a dangerous and irreversible step. As the camera lingers on Salastri's pained expressions, it's clear that she's at her breaking point. Her longing for motherhood is palpable, but so is her sense of helplessness. Sojimin, though seemingly supportive, is equally desperate. The couple's desperation soon finds them at the doorstep of something much darker than they could ever have imagined. In a shadowy, remote part of the village, they meet an enigmatic figure, a mysterious woman who speaks in riddles and seems to know everything about their desires. This woman, whose presence alone exudes an eerie calm, offers a solution to their problem, a deal with a demonic entity. The terms of the pact are simple yet vague. Deliver something in return for what they desire most. With no other options in sight, they agree. As they sign the ancient, ominous contract, the weight of their decision hangs over them, and we, the audience, can already feel the sinister undertones of what is to come. The air in the room shifts as the pact is sealed, and suddenly, the film's tone turns darker. A child is promised, but the nature of the deal seems too easy, too perfect to be true. There's a sense of dread that comes with this agreement, one that is hard to shake. The supernatural force looming over the couple is a presence that will not remain invisible for long. Fast forward to the birth of their twins, an event that should be joyous but is tainted by tragedy. The firstborn, a son, dies in the most mysterious of circumstances, his death unexplained and sudden. It's a heartbreaking moment that leaves the couple shattered, though they're not left entirely empty. The surviving twin, Kamala, a beautiful baby girl, is their last hope, and they cling to her with the fervor of people who believe they have been given a second chance. But from the moment Kamala is born, it's clear that something is wrong. There's a darkness in the air, a heavy sense of foreboding that hangs over the baby, a feeling that only grows as she matures. As Kamala grows older, her life is shaped by a darkness that seems to follow her. Her parents, once so hopeful, are now distant, consumed by their own guilt. They look at her with a mixture of love and fear, haunted by the knowledge that something went terribly wrong with the deal they made. They may have gotten the child they wanted, but at what cost? Salastri's eyes, once filled with maternal warmth, are now clouded with worry. She loves Kamala, but the child seems different, distant, strange, almost otherworldly in her quiet sadness. The tension between Salastri and Sojimin grows as they both begin to realize that the supernatural forces they bargained with might not be so easily escaped. They are caught in a web of guilt and fear, with every glance at Kamala intensifying their unease. The tension between them is palpable, with Sojimin often avoiding the child, too afraid to confront the consequences of their pact, while Salastri clings to her, trying desperately to make the best of what remains of her broken family. Their home, once a place of warmth and promise, now feels cold and suffocating, haunted by the choices they made. But it's Kamala's life that truly sets the tone for the darkness that is to come. As she enters school, her alienation becomes even more pronounced. The bullying she faces from her classmates is brutal, and the emotional wounds she suffers seem to sink deeper with each passing day. What's worse is the way her classmates, teachers, and even her parents treat her like she's not quite one of them. It's as though they can sense the darkness in her, and they shun her for it. She is the outsider, the strange girl who doesn't quite fit in, and the cruelty she faces only deepens the void inside her. One of the most pivotal moments in the first half of the film occurs when Kamala, now a little older, is violently bullied by a group of girls at school. The scene is visceral, raw, each slap, each taunt, each act of violence a direct reflection of the world's cruelty. What starts as an ordinary school day spirals into a chaotic event, and Kamala, pushed to the brink, finally snaps. The darkness inside her, something she's been carrying silently for years, erupts in a violent outburst. The bullies are terrified as Kamala's eyes seem to glow with an unnatural intensity, and in that moment, it's clear that she is no longer just a helpless child. She is becoming something else, something dangerous. This moment is not just a turning point for Kamala's character, but for the story as a whole. The supernatural forces that have been brewing beneath the surface of the film now make their presence felt. The violence she's subjected to seems to trigger a chain reaction, one that sets the stage for the terrible vengeance that will follow. Kamala is no longer just a victim. She is being molded by the darkness, and she is now a threat. The relationship between Kamala and her parents also begins to deteriorate at this point. Solastri, unable to comprehend the extent of Kamala's emotional and psychological scars, tries to comfort her in the only way she knows how, through overbearing affection. But it's too little, too late. Sojimin, meanwhile, grows more distant, increasingly consumed by the guilt of his decision to make the pact with the demonic entity. He becomes a shell of the man he once was, withdrawn and cold. The cracks in their relationship widen as the days pass, and Kamala, caught in the emotional crossfire, begins to withdraw further into herself. The tension in the house grows unbearable, and the first signs of the supernatural forces that have been influencing Kamala begin to manifest. Objects start moving on their own, doors slam without cause, and strange sounds echo through the empty house. Solastri and Sojimin are both unnerved by these occurrences, but it's Kamala who seems to be at the center of it all. They can no longer deny that something is happening to her, something that is beyond their control. The child they once hoped would bring joy into their lives is now a vessel for something much darker. As Kamala's behavior becomes increasingly erratic, the supernatural elements of the story intensify. The first hints of the vengeful spirit Somala begin to emerge in brief flashes. Shadowy figures in the corner of the frame, glimpses of something lurking just out of sight, a whisper on the wind. It's as though Kamala is being slowly consumed by something malevolent, something that has been waiting for the right moment to break free. The build-up is subtle, but it's unmistakable. In one of the film's most chilling sequences, Kamala, now a teenager, has a nightmare in which she is confronted by the spirit of her twin brother, who died at birth. The vision is haunting. Her brother's form is twisted and contorted, a ghostly figure that reaches out to her in a desperate plea. Kamala, terrified and confused, is unable to comprehend the meaning of the vision, but it feels like a harbinger of the inevitable. As the first half of Somala draws to a close, the film has already set the stage for something far darker. The supernatural forces that have been slowly building up are now on the verge of breaking free, and the cracks in the family's fragile facade have become impossible to ignore. The film has masterfully built a sense of dread and anticipation, with every moment pushing us closer to a confrontation with the vengeful spirit that is slowly taking control of Kamala. The first half of the movie leaves us hanging on the edge of our seats, waiting for the terrifying resolution that seems inevitable. It's a brilliant mix of psychological tension, emotional turmoil, and supernatural horror, and as the screen fades to black, we know that whatever comes next will be even more terrifying than what we've already witnessed. As Somala enters its second half, the atmosphere thickens, the tension rises, and the darkness that has been lurking beneath the surface throughout the first half finally begins to consume everything. The eerie and foreboding tone established early on is now palpable, and the horror that had once been a quiet whisper grows into an overwhelming presence, threatening to swallow the lives of the characters whole. Kamala, now a young woman, has fully embraced the sinister force within her. The quiet, isolated child who had once suffered in silence has been replaced by someone unrecognizable. With every passing day, she becomes more distant, her eyes hollow with an otherworldly coldness. What was once seen as psychological trauma is now undeniable. Kamala is no longer just a victim of her circumstances. She is the embodiment of an ancient malevolent spirit, a vessel for Somala, the demon she unknowingly carries within her. The first significant moment in the second half of the film is when Kamala's mother, Solastri, comes to a devastating realization. Her daughter is no longer the child she once knew. This moment is heartbreaking, layered with guilt and disbelief. Solastri, who has tried desperately to protect Kamala from the horrors of the past, finds herself face to face with the consequences of her own actions. She had made the choice to enter into the pact, and in doing so, she unwittingly sentenced her daughter to a life of torment. Salastri, overwhelmed by the truth, tries to reach out to Kamala, desperate to restore the bond they once had. But Kamala is unreachable now. The woman she has become is cold, detached, and terrifying. Their interactions grow more strained, and Salastri's attempts to save her daughter begin to feel futile. The emotional depth of this confrontation weighs heavily on the audience. The love between mother and daughter, once so palpable, is now strained by the invisible force that controls Kamala. As Salastri watches helplessly, the film dives deeper into Kamala's transformation. The first true manifestation of Somala occurs during a family dinner that turns into a nightmare. Kamala, seated at the table, begins to exhibit strange, disturbing behavior. Her eyes flicker with a malevolent energy, her voice taking on a deeper, more guttural tone. The transformation is gradual at first, but then it is unmistakable. The presence of Somala is taking full control. It's a chilling moment as Kamala's body contorts unnaturally, her once gentle demeanor replaced by an eerie, malicious energy. She is no longer just Kamala. She is Somala, the spirit who has been silently waiting to be freed. The horror intensifies when Kamala begins to wreak havoc on those around her, especially Salastri and Sojiman. In a fit of rage, she lashes out at her father, her anger boiling over as the darkness inside her consumes her entirely. Sojiman, who had been distant for so long, now realizes the full scope of the nightmare that has been unfolding in their home. He attempts to confront Kamala, but the spirit that has taken root within her is too powerful. The confrontation turns violent as Somala unleashes its wrath. Sojiman's face twists in horror as he witnesses the daughter he once loved, now twisted and corrupted, turn on him with a ferocity he never could have anticipated. It's a raw and terrifying moment, one that marks the breaking point of the family and of Kamala herself. The first real twist of the second half occurs when the true nature of the pact between Salastri, Sojiman, and the demonic entity is revealed. It's not just a matter of trading a child for a life. It's much darker than that. The pact had been designed not only to fulfill their desire for a child, but also to imprison their very souls. In exchange for the child they had always dreamed of, they had agreed to become vessels for the entity, bound to Somala's power for eternity. The revelation is devastating. The couple's love and yearning for a child had led them into the grasp of an ancient evil, one that had been manipulating them from the very beginning. The film uses this twist to deepen the emotional impact of the narrative. Salastri and Sojiman are trapped in a cycle of guilt, fear, and regret, but they can never escape their past decisions. The horror they are facing is not just a result of their daughter's transformation. It is a reflection of the choices they made years ago. The tragedy here is not just in the supernatural terror that consumes them, but in the emotional devastation of their own realization. They sold their souls in exchange for something they wanted, and now they are paying the price. Meanwhile, Kamala, now fully possessed by Somala, begins to unleash her fury on everyone who has wronged her. The first victims are those who had tormented her in school, the bullies who had once called her names and treated her as an outcast. In a tense, nightmarish sequence, Kamala seeks out her tormentors one by one, using the dark power of Somala to exact her revenge. The horror of these scenes is amplified by the slow, methodical pace at which Kamala hunts down her enemies. The camera lingers on her, now an embodiment of pure malevolence, as she moves through the shadows with an almost unnatural grace. The tension in these moments is suffocating. The audience knows that something terrible is about to happen, but the silence before it strikes is what makes it all the more terrifying. The sequence in which Kamala confronts her former bullies is a chilling meditation on revenge and justice. The girls who once tormented her are now powerless before her, and their terror is palpable. As Kamala exacts her vengeance, it becomes clear that the spirit of Somala has consumed every part of her, transforming her into an unstoppable force of nature. The victims are helpless as Kamala's rage spills out in a violent torrent, the walls of her humanity collapsing entirely. The film's pacing here shifts, moving from psychological horror to pure, unrelenting terror as Kamala exacts brutal retribution. The film's climax reaches a boiling point when Salastri and Sojiman, desperate to save their daughter, come face to face with the supernatural entity that controls her. In an act of last-ditch desperation, the couple attempts to break the pact by confronting the demon head-on. This moment is both heartbreaking and terrifying. The entity, a dark and formless presence, manifests in a way that is both horrifying and mesmerizing. An impossible, shifting mass of shadows and whispers. Salastri, her face drawn with both fear and determination, pleads with the entity for her daughter's life. But it's too late. The entity's power is too great. Somala has already taken full control of Kamala, and there is no turning back. In one of the most emotionally charged moments of the film, Salastri and Sojiman realize that they are powerless to save their daughter. Their attempts to undo the pact only make things worse, driving Kamala deeper into the grasp of the demon. The pain and regret on their faces are palpable as they are forced to confront the unthinkable truth. They are the architects of their own downfall. The love they had for Kamala has been twisted into something monstrous, and there is no escaping the consequences of their actions. The final act is both haunting and tragic, as Kamala, now fully transformed into Somala, unleashes her full fury on the world that has rejected her. The film's resolution is a bittersweet one, as the supernatural horror that has gripped the family finally comes to a head. Somala is not just a tale of revenge. It's a meditation on the consequences of desire, the destructive power of guilt, and the weight of the choices we make. The final moments are tense, leaving the audience with a lingering sense of unease, as we realize that the horror isn't over. It's only just begun. As the credits roll, we are left with the haunting question of whether redemption is possible, or if the characters are doomed to remain in the clutches of the demonic entity forever. Somala's second half, with its revelations, twists, and emotional weight, ties together the various threads of the story in a way that leaves us both terrified and moved. The horror is not just in the supernatural forces at play, but in the human emotions, the regrets, the fears, and the long-buried secrets that fuel it. It's a masterclass in blending psychological horror with supernatural terror, and it leaves an indelible mark on the viewer long after the final scene fades to black. In Somala, every character is intricately woven into the fabric of a tale that explores the darkest depths of human desire, guilt, and supernatural horror. At the heart of the film are Salastri and Sojiman, a couple whose longing for a child drives them to make a pact that will ultimately haunt them and their daughter. But it's Kamala, their daughter, who embodies the core of the film's emotional and supernatural conflict. Her transformation from innocent child to vessel of a malevolent force forming the crux of the narrative. The story begins with Salastri, played by Luna Maya, whose portrayal of a mother torn between love and guilt resonates deeply. From the outset, Salastri's motivations are rooted in a desperate, all-consuming desire to have a child. She is a woman who has lived through years of disappointment and heartbreak, each failed attempt at conception leaving a scar on her psyche. As the camera lingers on her face, the grief and weariness are palpable, making the viewer empathize with her need to be a mother. Luna Maya's performance here is poignant, capturing a depth of emotion that turns Salastri from a mere vessel of maternal instinct into a fully realized, tragic figure. There is vulnerability in her eyes, a yearning that leads her to make the unthinkable decision to strike a deal with an unknown, demonic force. It's clear that her desperation to hold her family together, to give her husband a child and herself the fulfillment she has always dreamed of, blinds her to the consequences of her actions. Salastri's arc is ultimately one of profound realization. She starts the film as a woman blinded by hope, only to spiral into guilt and regret as she realizes that the child she's brought into the world has been twisted by the very forces she once thought could bring her happiness. What makes Luna Maya's performance so powerful is her ability to convey the quiet, internal unraveling of Salastri. It's a subtle descent into terror and grief as she watches her daughter, her only hope for redemption, transform into something unrecognizable. By the time Salastri confronts the horror of what she's done, Luna Maya's performance has seamlessly shifted from a grieving mother to a woman on the brink of emotional and spiritual collapse. Salastri is faced with a heartbreaking choice: whether to continue fighting for Kamala, who is now a puppet of the malevolent entity, or to let her go and accept the irreversible damage done by her pact. Darius Sanathria's portrayal of Sojiman adds yet another layer of complexity to the film's emotional core. Where Salastri is driven by the singular desire to be a mother, Sojiman is caught in the tug-of-war between his love for his wife and the fear that their choices have damned them. From the beginning, Sojiman is a man who, though supportive of his wife's efforts, is emotionally withdrawn. His struggle to connect with Kamala, particularly as she begins to exhibit signs of supernatural influence, is a silent but powerful expression of the conflict within him. As the film progresses, Darius Sanathria brings an incredible depth to Sojiman's character, playing a man who is constantly battling his growing guilt and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Sojiman is the character whose emotional breakdown is felt the hardest. He begins as a man trying to protect his family, only to realize that his attempt to control the uncontrollable has shattered everything he holds dear. Sanathria's performance brilliantly captures Sojiman's descent into isolation. By the film's climax, Sojiman is no longer a man, but a shell of the person he once was, a man haunted by his decisions, struggling to keep his family from disintegrating while battling the overwhelming force of supernatural guilt. His pain is more visceral than that of Salastri because his relationship with Kamala is one of constant tension and avoidance. Unlike Salastri, who at least tries to connect with Kamala through affection, Sojiman's guilt keeps him distant. It's this emotional distance that makes his eventual collapse feel all the more tragic. But it is Kamala, portrayed by a young actress whose nuanced performance steals the show, who is the most compelling figure in the film. At the start, Kamala is an innocent child, sweet, withdrawn, and sensitive. She is the embodiment of her parents' dreams, and yet, she is marked by an inexplicable sadness. As she grows older, the darkness inside her begins to surface, turning her into something otherworldly, a being caught between two worlds. The actress portraying Kamala skillfully navigates this transformation, moving from a fragile, neglected child into a powerful, malevolent entity. The key to Kamala's character is that her journey isn't just about succumbing to a demonic influence. It's about the crushing weight of her parents' decisions on her psyche. At her core, Kamala is not evil. She's a victim of the circumstances that her parents created for her. Yet, as the supernatural presence within her grows, she becomes more detached from humanity, more estranged from her family, more consumed by the need for vengeance. The subtlety with which the actress portrays Kamala's growing malevolence is what makes her performance unforgettable. Her eyes, once filled with innocence, become cold and unnerving, reflecting the growing darkness inside her. In scenes where Kamala confronts her parents, the viewer feels the internal conflict she's experiencing. Is she fighting the demon that possesses her, or has she been consumed by it entirely? The line between victim and villain is expertly blurred, making Kamala one of the most tragic figures in the story. Kamala's transformation is mirrored by the changes in her relationship with Salastri and Sojiman. The closer Salastri tries to get, the further Kamala slips away. She moves between fits of violent rage and moments of haunting vulnerability, creating an emotional roller coaster that leaves the audience unsure of whether to pity or fear her. In the heartbreaking scene where Kamala, now fully possessed by Somala, lashes out at Sojiman, we see a young woman who has become a monster but is still trapped in her own pain. Kamala is a symbol of lost innocence, her transformation a tragic result of her parents' actions. Supporting characters in Somala are integral to understanding the complexity of the family dynamics and how the supernatural elements intertwine with the human tragedy. The mysterious woman who introduces Salastri and Sojiman to the demonic pact is an enigmatic figure whose presence hovers over the entire film like a dark omen. Her performance is subtle but impactful. She speaks in riddles, never fully explaining the consequences of the pact, but hinting at the inevitable tragedy that will unfold. Her role is one of manipulation, serving as the catalyst for the family's downfall, but she is never portrayed as overtly sinister. The ambiguity of her character, the question of whether she is merely a messenger or a malevolent force in her own right, adds an additional layer of tension to the film. Other supporting characters, such as Kamala's classmates, who bully her throughout the film, serve as catalysts for Kamala's transformation into Somala. The cruelty of her peers highlights the social isolation Kamala feels, and their eventual demise becomes a terrifying form of retribution. Each victim Kamala claims is representative of her emotional release, a purging of the years of pain and neglect. The secondary characters are vital in showing the effects of the trauma on Kamala, but it is the primary characters of Salastri, Sojiman, and Kamala who are truly unforgettable. Their emotional arcs mirror the themes of Somala: the consequences of desire, the inescapable grip of guilt, and the weight of a pact that was made without fully understanding the cost. The performances of Luna Maya, Darius Sanathria, and the young actress playing Kamala elevate the material, imbuing it with emotional resonance that goes beyond the typical supernatural horror. At its core, Somala is a story about human flaws, about the choices we make, the consequences they bring, and the way they reverberate through generations. Each character's transformation is not just a result of external supernatural forces, but of their own inner desires and guilt. In this sense, the characters of Somala are not merely victims of a demonic pact. They are reflections of the darkness that resides in us all. Through their performances, the actors give life to a narrative that is both terrifying and profoundly tragic, making the horror of Somala feel deeply human. Somala is a film that thrives not just on its chilling narrative, but also on its subtle, meticulously crafted details that elevate it to a new level of sophistication. The movie is full of hidden references, cultural symbols, and clever foreshadowing, making it a treasure trove for viewers who are paying close attention. As we venture deeper into the heart of the film, we uncover these subtle elements, realizing just how rich and layered the story truly is. These details, often woven into the backdrop of scenes or tucked into seemingly insignificant moments, create a tapestry that deepens the horror, mystery, and tragedy of Somala. From the opening sequence, we are immediately drawn into a world that feels both familiar and unsettling. The choice of setting, a decaying, once beautiful house on the outskirts of a village, speaks volumes about the story's core themes. This house, with its cracked walls and broken windows, is not just a place for the family to live, but also serves as a metaphor for the crumbling relationships within. The house itself is steeped in symbolism, mirroring the emotional decay of Salastri and Sojiman's marriage, as well as the deterioration of their hopes and dreams. This subtle symbolism begins immediately, as the camera lingers on the house, which, in many ways, feels like a character itself, constantly reminding us of the fragility of the family's situation. As we dive deeper into the narrative, we begin to notice the presence of objects that seem insignificant at first but later carry heavy symbolic weight. One of the most prominent symbols is the recurring motif of mirrors. Throughout the film, mirrors are used as a tool to reflect not just physical appearance, but emotional and psychological states. In the early scenes, Kamala's reflection in mirrors is almost always distorted. Her image flickers, warps, or appears fragmented, reflecting the inner turmoil she's experiencing as the demon within her begins to take hold. This visual motif continues throughout the film, with mirrors serving as a metaphor for the fractured identities of the characters, particularly Kamala. When she looks into a mirror, it's almost as if she is trying to find herself, but the image staring back at her is never truly her. This symbolism is a direct reflection of her internal battle, struggling between the innocence of her childhood and the growing darkness that consumes her. One of the most effective and subtle bits of foreshadowing comes in the form of a recurring dream sequence Kamala experiences in the early part of the film. She dreams of a vast, endless ocean, where she is adrift in a small boat. The waters are calm at first, but as the dream progresses, the sky darkens, and the waters become rough and violent. There is a moment where Kamala's boat capsizes, and she is pulled beneath the waves, sinking deeper and deeper into the dark abyss. This dream sequence, with its sense of foreboding, is an allegory for Kamala's gradual descent into the clutches of Somala. The ocean represents the overwhelming force of the supernatural power that is consuming her, and the sinking of the boat symbolizes her loss of control. The first time this sequence is shown, it may seem like an eerie, random nightmare, but as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that this is not just a dream. It's a foreshadowing of her transformation. Another moment of foreshadowing lies in the seemingly insignificant objects scattered around the house. Early in the film, there is a brief shot of a small, worn-down toy, an old doll that Kamala had when she was younger. This doll, which she keeps hidden away in her room, serves as a symbol of her lost childhood. The doll is disfigured, its eyes cracked and its limbs broken, making it a representation of the fractured nature of Kamala's psyche. As the film progresses, the doll becomes more and more prominent. In the climax, it is found in an unsettling position in her room, directly next to her bed, as if it's watching her. This innocent childhood toy, now warped and broken, symbolizes Kamala's loss of innocence and the corruption of her humanity. In the final act, the doll plays a crucial role, as it is used by the demon to further taunt Solastri. The imagery of the doll, juxtaposed with Kamala's transformation, creates a poignant and tragic sense of how her childhood was stolen from her. The film also plays heavily with the theme of mirrors as a reflection of one's true self. But there is one particular scene where this idea is taken even further. In the second half of the film, Kamala, in her full demonic form, stands in front of a large, ornate mirror. For the first time, we see her reflection clearly, but it's not just her reflection. It's Somala staring back at her. The demon has fully consumed her, and the mirror no longer reflects her true self, but the monster she has become. The use of the mirror here is deeply symbolic, as it represents a moment of self-awareness for Kamala. She is no longer just a victim. She has embraced the demon's power and accepted her dark fate. This haunting image reinforces the idea that the mirror is not just an object of vanity or self-reflection, but a conduit to the darker aspects of the soul. The cultural references embedded in the film add another layer of depth, particularly for those familiar with Indonesian mythology. The name Somala itself is a direct nod to traditional folklore, particularly the myth of Suma, the demon spirit that inhabits the bodies of young girls. The film draws on this cultural heritage, intertwining the supernatural elements with real-world fears and beliefs. The way Somala manifests itself through Kamala's body and soul is not just a fantastical concept. It's an exploration of the terrifying consequences of invoking ancient powers. The film subtly acknowledges the Indonesian belief in spirits and demons, which often come with a heavy price, blending cultural elements with its supernatural horror. There's also a moment in the film that subtly references the classic tale of Jaka Tarub, a famous Indonesian folktale about a man who steals the magical shawl of a celestial nymph. In the film, Solastri's desperation mirrors the desire of Jaka Tarub, a man so consumed by the wish to possess something so pure and unattainable that he is willing to break sacred laws. Just as Jaka Tarub's theft leads to tragic consequences, Solastri's decision to make the pact for a child leads to her family's eventual destruction. The film uses this folklore to comment on the dangers of selfish desire and the inevitable downfall that comes with it. Perhaps the most chilling Easter egg is found in the background of a particular scene when Kamala is first visited by the demon in full force. In the shadows, for just a moment, you can spot the outline of an ancient, demonic figure that closely resembles the one depicted in Indonesian traditional art. The figure, draped in ceremonial clothing, stands with an unsettling calm, watching Kamala. This figure, though barely visible and easy to miss, serves as a chilling reminder of the true force that Somala embodies. A primordial power that has existed long before the events of the film and will continue to exist long after the family's fate has been sealed. Another subtle yet brilliant reference lies in the way the weather shifts throughout the film. The skies are often stormy and unpredictable, mirroring the emotional states of the characters, particularly Kamala. At one point, as she becomes fully possessed, the rain pours down in torrents, and the wind howls as if nature itself is rebelling against her transformation. These shifts in weather not only heighten the tension, but are also symbolic of the chaos that Somala is unleashing on the family and their lives. The unpredictable weather becomes an external manifestation of the internal turmoil that Kamala, and by extension her family, feels as they spiral out of control. For sharp-eyed viewers, the final scene offers a reward for those who have been paying attention to the small details throughout the film. As the credits roll, the camera briefly lingers on a family photo, previously seen in the background of earlier scenes. In this photo, the family is smiling, seemingly content. But if you look closely, you'll notice something chilling, the reflection of a shadowy figure behind them, one that looks eerily like Somala. This unsettling image suggests that the demon has always been there, lurking just beyond their reach, even before the pact was made. The subtle placement of this figure in the background is a haunting reminder that the forces of darkness were always waiting to claim the family, a sinister presence hidden in plain sight. Somala is a masterclass in subtlety and precision, its narrative richness enhanced by the many layers of hidden details and cultural references woven throughout the film. These clever touches are not just Easter eggs for horror fans, but also deepen the emotional resonance of the story, making each reveal feel earned and rewarding. As we uncover the hidden meanings behind the symbols, foreshadowing, and cultural callbacks, we realize that Somala is more than just a supernatural horror film. It is a meditation on desire, guilt, and the ancient forces that govern our lives, waiting for the right moment to make their presence known. Behind the haunting beauty of Somala lies a complex and fascinating production journey, one filled with challenges, controversies, and a cast and crew who took every creative risk to bring this supernatural tale to life. The making of this film wasn't just about creating a horror story. It was about capturing the essence of human emotion, cultural folklore, and the terrifying unknown. As we peel back the layers of Somala, we discover a web of stories from the set, casting decisions, creative choices, and the behind-the-scenes drama that brought the film into existence. From the moment director Satriya Indra embarked on this project, it was clear that Somala would be no ordinary horror film. Unlike typical supernatural thrillers, Somala drew heavily from Indonesian cultural heritage, folklore, and myth. The film's unique blend of horror with cultural nuance demanded that every decision, from the casting to the set design to the filming process, be treated with care and respect for the cultural elements it sought to portray. Yet, behind this careful design, there were many unexpected hurdles and strange stories that unfolded as the movie progressed. One of the biggest challenges in the film's production came early on: finding the right location. The filmmakers wanted to film in a place that was not just visually striking but also steeped in atmosphere. An old, crumbling house that would serve as the home for Salastri, Sojiman, and their daughter, Kamala. After months of scouting, they found a remote estate in the outskirts of a village in central Java. The house, while picturesque in its dilapidation, came with a set of eerie circumstances that were hard to ignore. Local legends surrounding the house claimed it was haunted, with previous inhabitants reporting unsettling phenomena like strange noises, sudden cold spots, and even sightings of figures in the windows at night. Initially, this seemed like an atmospheric boon for the production, but things took an unexpected turn once filming began. During the first week of shooting, several members of the cast and crew began to experience unexplained occurrences. Luna Maya, who plays Salastri, reported feeling a heavy weight on her chest during particularly intense scenes, as though something was pressing on her from behind. One crew member even claimed to have heard whispers coming from the house's long-abandoned attic when no one was up there. The crew attributed these incidents to nerves or the oppressive atmosphere of the old house, but there was a lingering unease on set that couldn't be ignored. Some cast members joked that the house itself was playing a role in the film, adding an authentic supernatural element to the production. However, as things progressed, the eerie occurrences grew more frequent. One night, during a particularly late scene, the lighting equipment malfunctioned repeatedly, with several technicians swearing that they saw shadows moving in the corner of their vision. As bizarre as it sounds, there were rumors circulating on set that the house's unsettling presence had an unexpected effect on the performance of the cast, particularly Luna Maya. Her portrayal of Salastri's gradual descent into terror and guilt was so convincing that some believed it was influenced by the atmosphere in the house. In fact, Maya herself admitted that she was having nightmares after the filming sessions, which made it all the more difficult to leave the world of Somala behind each day. For the crew, the combination of physical and psychological stress during the shoot made the entire production feel like a never-ending ride through the supernatural. It was as though the haunted house had seeped into the film itself, lending an authenticity to the horror that wasn't part of the original plan. Of course, the creepy incidents weren't all bad luck. The filmmakers were adamant about capturing every moment authentically, and they embraced the eerie energy that surrounded them. Some of the film's most terrifying shots, like the close-ups of Kamala's reflection in the mirror or the intense scenes of possession, were filmed in total darkness with very minimal lighting. These decisions were based on the belief that less visibility would create a more visceral, unsettling experience for both the actors and the audience. As a result, many of the film's scenes were physically and emotionally exhausting for the cast, especially the child actress who played Kamala. Interestingly, casting the role of Kamala was one of the most challenging and unusual decisions in the entire production. The filmmakers wanted someone who could authentically represent the innocence of a child, while also embodying the tragic and sinister transformation that would ultimately occur. They auditioned hundreds of young actresses from across Indonesia, but it wasn't until they found Rina Permata, a newcomer to acting, that they knew they had found their Kamala. Rina had no formal acting training, but her emotional depth and ability to evoke both innocence and menace made her the perfect choice for the role. However, Rina's transformation from a vulnerable child to a vessel of the demonic force was a difficult one to film. Many of the scenes where Kamala is possessed were shot in a manner that required the young actress to perform under extreme physical duress. At one point during filming, Rina was asked to remain completely still for an extended period while the special effects team created the illusion of her levitating. To help her stay in character, director Satria Indra would whisper fragments of the script to her between takes, encouraging her to imagine the torment Kamala would feel as her innocence was stolen away. The emotional toll of these intense sequences left Rina exhausted, but her performance was nothing short of remarkable. But it wasn't just the child actors who faced challenges. Darius Sanathria, who portrayed Sojiman, found himself in the middle of a controversial scene that tested his physical and emotional limits. During the climax of the film, when Sojiman is forced to confront his daughter in full demonic form, Sanathria had to perform an emotionally charged scene where he must grapple with the horrifying reality of what Kamala has become. To prepare for the scene, Sanathria spent several days alone in the house, reflecting on the emotional journey of his character. This period of isolation helped him connect with the profound guilt and terror Sojiman feels at that moment. The intensity of the scene left Sanathria physically drained, but it was his raw emotion that made the final confrontation so powerful. One of the more unusual behind-the-scenes stories involves the sound design of Somala. Given the film's emphasis on atmosphere and tension, the sound team made a bold decision to experiment with non-traditional sound effects. Instead of relying on standard horror movie tropes, like sudden, loud noises or creaking doors, the sound team opted for a more subtle approach. They used low-frequency hums, faint whispers, and the eerie creaking of floorboards to build a sense of dread. The most innovative sound design choice came in the form of a single, haunting note that would play quietly in the background during moments of high tension. This note would slowly escalate in volume and intensity until it reached a pitch that felt almost unbearable. The idea was to create a sense of discomfort in the viewer, making them feel as though the sound was physically pressing in on them. It was a unique approach that paid off, as the film's sound design became one of the most discussed aspects after its release. In a strange twist of fate, Somala also had its share of unexpected production delays, which were rumored to be linked to the supernatural occurrences on set. The most unusual of these delays happened toward the film's final stages, when the crew found that several important scenes had mysteriously disappeared from the film's footage. Despite the team having meticulously backed up all the data, an entire day of filming was wiped clean, and the footage could not be recovered. While some speculated that the loss was a technical glitch, others on set believed that it was the work of something far more sinister, an unexplained force manipulating the outcome of the film. The incident added to the mounting sense of unease surrounding the production, but the filmmakers decided to embrace the mystery rather than let it derail their progress. They reshot the missing scenes, and in the end, the film benefited from the unplanned delay, adding more depth and intensity to the final product. Perhaps one of the strangest and most controversial moments in Somala's production history occurred during the marketing campaign. Several weeks before the film's release, a viral campaign was launched featuring a mysterious teaser video that showed a shadowy figure appearing in the background of various everyday scenes. The teaser quickly went viral, with fans speculating whether it was a clever marketing stunt or a real supernatural event. Many were convinced that the mysterious figure was somehow connected to the Somala demon. The campaign caused quite a stir, with some viewers praising its innovation and others criticizing it for potentially crossing the line between reality and fiction. The controversy only fueled excitement for the film's release, but it also led to an ethical debate about the use of supernatural marketing tactics in a genre already known for blurring the lines between reality and fiction. Despite these controversies and challenges, Somala emerged as a standout film, one that captivated audiences not only for its compelling story but also for its fascinating production journey. The challenges faced during filming, the creative decisions, and the unexplained occurrences on set all contributed to the film's eerie and authentic atmosphere. As the cast and crew look back on the making of Somala, it's clear that the strange and unsettling moments that happened behind the scenes were as integral to the film's success as the story itself. It's a film that transcends its genre, and part of its power lies in the mystery that surrounds its creation. A story not just of supernatural horror, but of how the darkness of the unknown seeps into every corner of filmmaking. Somala is a film that doesn't just rely on jump scares or cheap thrills. It digs deep into the emotional and psychological core of its characters and explores the slow unraveling of their lives through supernatural forces. With its rich layers of symbolism, cultural references, and haunting performances, the film is packed with moments that linger long after the credits roll. These key moments aren't just important for their shock value. They play a vital role in shaping the overall narrative, emotional resonance, and thematic weight of the film. Each of these scenes invites a deeper analysis, revealing not just the story of Somala but the complex layers of human desire, guilt, fear, and transformation. One of the first key moments that sets the tone for the entire film occurs in the opening sequence. The movie opens with a quiet, serene shot of the house that Salastri, Sojiman, and Kamala call home. There's an overwhelming stillness to the scene, a feeling of anticipation that something is brewing just beneath the surface. The house, though quaint, is dilapidated, with cracked windows and faded wallpaper. It's not just a setting. It's a character in itself, reflecting the fragile state of the family's emotional and mental well-being. The camera lingers on the quiet moments within this house. Empty hallways, rooms filled with forgotten objects, and flickering lights. This eerie tranquility draws the audience in, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Here, the film's thematic concerns begin to emerge. What once was whole is now broken. And much like the house, the family too is on the verge of collapse. This moment feels like a metaphor for the gradual deterioration of innocence, the inevitability of something dark lurking beneath what seems like a peaceful, ordinary life. The first truly significant moment comes when Kamala, the young daughter, begins to show signs of strange behavior. At first, it's subtle, a look in her eyes, an unsettling gesture. But it's during a quiet dinner scene that the full scope of her transformation becomes evident. Salastri notices that Kamala has suddenly stopped eating and is staring into the distance. The air grows heavy, and we see a chilling, unnatural calm descend over the girl. The dinner table, usually a place of familial warmth, becomes a battleground where the invisible presence of Somala slowly begins to seep into the fabric of their lives. Kamala's quiet detachment in this scene serves as an early sign of her possession. The shot of her eyes, wide and glazed over, reel in the viewer, hinting at the overwhelming power that is slowly taking hold of her. This moment is a turning point in the film because it shifts the family's reality from something grounded in the mundane to the terrifying unknown. The juxtaposition of the serene family meal with the sudden, palpable tension underscores the horror of Somala. It's not the external supernatural forces that are most dangerous, but the quiet internal transformation that no one sees coming. One of the most emotionally charged and thematically rich moments occurs later in the film when Salastri, desperate to save her daughter, confronts Kamala in her room. This scene is a culmination of the emotional and psychological tension that has been building throughout the film. Salastri, having noticed the disturbing changes in Kamala's behavior, tries to reach her daughter one last time. What follows is a heartbreaking, emotional confrontation in which the boundaries between mother and daughter begin to blur. Salastri speaks to Kamala as if she's still the innocent girl she once knew, But the entity that has taken over Kamala's body is far from that. In one of the most chilling moments in the film, Kamala, no longer in control of her own actions, delivers a line that is both horrifying and heart-wrenching. "I am not her anymore." This sentence is both an affirmation and a death knell for Salastri, who realizes that she has lost her daughter. This confrontation highlights the theme of loss and transformation in Somala, the idea that some things are beyond repair, that once corrupted, there's no turning back. The emotional devastation of this moment is amplified by the haunting visuals and the slow, painful music that accompanies it, making it one of the most powerful scenes in the entire film. The possession of Kamala, while tragic, is also symbolic of a deeper thematic thread running throughout the film: the destruction of innocence and the inevitable descent into darkness. This idea is represented most poignantly in a sequence where Kamala's transformation reaches its climax. The family's once peaceful and vibrant home becomes a battleground for possession, and Kamala's body contorts and twists in unnatural ways, her face shifting between that of the demon and her own innocent self. As she physically and emotionally breaks down, it's impossible for the audience to not feel the tragedy of her plight. Her transformation isn't just a literal possession. It's a loss of her very identity, and what makes it even more gut-wrenching is that this transformation is beyond her control. The tragic nature of Kamala's possession is underscored by the harrowing visual of her trying to claw at her own skin, as though attempting to escape the monstrous form she has become. This imagery, combined with the unnerving sound design and the haunting performances, carries the weight of the film's primary themes: guilt, sacrifice, and the loss of what was once pure. In contrast to the increasingly dark transformation of Kamala, Somala presents moments of light and hope that feel just as heavy with emotional significance. One of the most powerful moments of quiet reflection comes when Salastri visits a local priest for guidance. She seeks help, asking for a way to save her daughter, but the priest's response is both unsettling and heartbreaking. Some things cannot be undone. The tension between hope and helplessness is felt here, and the despair in Salastri's eyes is palpable. This conversation is crucial because it marks the realization that the family's fate has already been sealed. What follows is the deepening of Salastri's desperation, and the quiet horror of accepting that she is powerless to save her own daughter. This scene highlights one of Somala's central themes: the tension between human agency and the overwhelming force of fate. No matter how much Salastri tries to fight the supernatural forces at work, the narrative makes it clear that fate is a force much greater than she could ever hope to understand or control. As the tension continues to build, one of the film's most iconic moments comes toward the final act, where the family is forced into an ultimate confrontation with Somala. The dark, shadowy figure that has been building toward this moment finally manifests itself in full, and it's as terrifying as it is symbolic. In a ritualistic scene, the family must face the demon head-on, but what follows is not just a physical battle. It's an emotional one, too. The family is forced to confront their own darkest fears, regrets, and guilt, with the realization that their destruction was set into motion long before Kamala was born. This scene is less about the battle between good and evil and more about the introspective journey that each character must take to understand their part in the tragedy. It becomes clear that Somala is less a supernatural entity and more a manifestation of the family's collective sins, the result of past mistakes, broken promises, and the overwhelming weight of their actions. In this moment, the audience is confronted not with the need for salvation, but with the tragic inevitability of the family's fate. One of the most significant aspects of Somala is how it plays with the idea of fate versus free will. Throughout the film, the characters struggle against forces they don't understand or can't control. This is especially true for Salastri, who is caught between her desire to protect her family and the brutal reality that they are already doomed. The climactic final scene, where Salastri faces her daughter in a final, desperate attempt to save her, encapsulates this theme. The pain on Salastri's face as she realizes that there is nothing left to be done, that she must finally accept the fate of her daughter, is both heartbreaking and cathartic. The emotional weight of this scene, the loss of hope, the surrender to fate, is what elevates Somala from a typical supernatural thriller into something far more profound and resonant. The way these key moments are crafted in Somala ensures that each scene plays a pivotal role in shaping the film's emotional depth, thematic richness, and overall impact. The tragedy of Kamala's possession, the inevitable breakdown of the family, and the final acceptance of fate create a complex tapestry of horror that is as much about the human experience as it is about the supernatural. The emotional depth, combined with the chilling visuals and haunting performances, leaves the audience feeling as though they've experienced something far more personal than just a film about demons. It's a story about loss, guilt, and the destructive nature of forces beyond our control. These key moments, each charged with a unique emotional energy, are what makes Somala not just a terrifying film, but a deeply moving one that resonates on a much deeper level. The making of Somala was far from a typical production process. It wasn't simply about turning a script into a film. It was about harnessing the supernatural to create a palpable atmosphere of tension, fear, and unease. The vision behind the film was one that pushed the boundaries of traditional horror, blending innovative technical achievements with rich cultural storytelling. From the onset, the filmmakers wanted to do something different, something that would make Somala stand out in a crowded genre. And while the story itself was already compelling, it was the groundbreaking techniques, creative choices, and unexpected behind-the-scenes moments that would elevate the film into a truly unforgettable experience. One of the key creative decisions that shaped Somala was its deliberate focus on atmosphere. The supernatural elements of the film weren't there simply to frighten the audience. They were carefully woven into the narrative to create a sense of dread that built gradually over time. And in order to achieve this, director Satriya Indra and his team knew that they needed to focus on the environment in which the story took place. From the very first scene, the film's setting, a decaying house, was not just a backdrop but a reflection of the family's mental and emotional state. The house itself became a character, with every creaking floorboard, dimly lit corner, and shuttered window contributing to the film's overwhelming sense of foreboding. Filming in a real, crumbling estate in central Java, the production team worked tirelessly to capture the haunted, decaying beauty of the house. The team used the location's natural deterioration to their advantage, taking full advantage of the house's dilapidated state rather than covering up its flaws. The peeling wallpaper, chipped wood, and overgrown garden all became metaphors for the slowly decaying lives of the characters. This decision was not just an aesthetic one. It was about grounding the supernatural elements in a tangible reality that felt connected to the emotional and psychological struggles of the family. The rawness of the environment made every haunted corner feel like it was alive with its own secrets, ready to swallow the characters whole. However, working with such an unpredictable and unstable environment also brought its own set of challenges. One of the most difficult aspects of filming in such an old, dilapidated house was the constant risk of things breaking or malfunctioning. During a crucial scene in which Salastri, played by Luna Maya, is navigating the hallways of the house in search of her daughter, the ceiling above her unexpectedly collapsed due to the structural instability of the house. This could have been disastrous, but the team managed to dodge serious injury, and they used the incident to their advantage. Rather than shooting the scene in the sterile, controlled environment of a studio, they embraced the authentic chaos of the house. The cracked walls, the dark, musty corners, and the sound of the floorboards creaking beneath the characters' feet all heightened the sense of realism, which in turn contributed to the movie's grounding sense of terror. But it wasn't just the physical environment that made Somala so immersive. The film's technical innovations also played a key role in creating its haunting atmosphere. Perhaps one of the most striking aspects of the film's visual style is its use of lighting. Rather than relying on the usual horror tropes of sudden bursts of light or overly dramatic contrasts, Somala employed a subtler approach. Cinematographer Hendra Anwar used natural light sources as much as possible, allowing the setting to define itself through its shadows. This approach gave the film a distinct visual quality, a quiet, suffocating darkness that pervaded the entire narrative. The shadows were never just background. They were a reflection of the supernatural presence that loomed over the characters, often filling the frame in subtle ways. It wasn't uncommon for a scene to feature long, creeping shadows that would slowly move across the room, mimicking the characters' slow realization of the evil that surrounded them. The lighting techniques were meticulously designed to create a visual tension that mirrored the emotional tension of the characters. One of the standout moments comes during a scene where Kamala, played by Reena Permata, begins to exhibit strange behavior, staring blankly into space while her mother tries to break through to her. The light in the room is dim, with only a single bulb hanging over Kamala's head, casting long shadows across her face. The minimalistic lighting here doesn't simply highlight the terror of the moment. It intensifies it, turning Kamala's blank expression into a terrifying portrait of emptiness. Every twitch of her eye, every small shift in her posture is magnified by the play of light and shadow, turning what could have been a simple conversation into a slow-building nightmare. But the lighting wasn't just about creating tension in the film's visuals. It was also about highlighting the emotional beats of the story. This is especially evident in the final confrontation between Salastri and Kamala, where the lighting shifts dramatically as Salastri confronts the demon that has possessed her daughter. The once dimly lit house is now bathed in stark, cold light, representing the harsh reality of what has become of their family. This shift in lighting parallels the shift in the emotional landscape of the film, from the quiet, creeping dread of the first half to the full-on devastation of the final act. By using lighting not just as a tool to create atmosphere, but as a way to express the psychological and emotional states of the characters, the film transformed lighting into a narrative device in itself. Equally important was the film's sound design, which worked hand in hand with the visual techniques to establish the eerie tone of Somala. The sound team employed a minimalist approach, focusing on subtle noises that would amplify the sense of isolation and fear. The creak of a door, the distant howling of wind, the soft tapping of unseen footsteps. These small, seemingly insignificant sounds filled the space, becoming part of the narrative. The decision to use so many quiet, natural sounds meant that when something truly terrifying happened, like a door slamming or a scream, the impact was amplified tenfold. It wasn't about filling every moment with noise. It was about creating an immersive auditory landscape that made every sound feel significant, even when nothing was happening on screen. Perhaps one of the most memorable sound moments in the film comes during a scene in which Salastri is alone in the house late at night. The sound of a baby crying echoes through the halls, but as Salastri searches for the source, the sound becomes increasingly distorted and disorienting, until it is no longer clear whether it is real or just a hallucination. This manipulation of sound plays on the audience's senses, keeping them just on the edge of certainty. Is it the house that's making these noises? Or is it the creeping madness within Salastri herself? This blurring of reality and illusion adds a psychological depth to the film's terror, making the horror not just external but internal, too. The technical challenges of Somala didn't just end with lighting and sound, though. The film also pushed the boundaries of special effects and practical effects in ways that weren't immediately obvious. The visual representation of possession was a key element of the film, and instead of relying on digital effects or CGI, the filmmakers opted for practical makeup and prosthetics to bring the demon's influence on Kamala to life. The effect of Kamala's body contorting and changing was achieved through a combination of body manipulation, makeup, and creative camera work. The physicality of these scenes added a visceral quality to the film that wouldn't have been possible with digital effects alone. The filmmakers were determined to keep the supernatural elements grounded in reality, which meant using practical techniques that allowed for a greater sense of authenticity in the horror. However, even with these practical effects, there were moments of technical experimentation. One such moment involved the film's climactic scene, where Kamala's possession reaches its peak. To create the unnerving sense that Kamala's body was being controlled by something otherworldly, the special effects team used a combination of clever rigging, slow-motion shots, and camera tricks. This made the contortions of her body feel unnatural, almost fluid, as though she was not entirely in control. The filmmakers used these techniques to create a surreal, nightmarish effect, pushing the audience to question what was real and what was merely a terrifying projection of their own fears. As much as the technical achievements in Somala were vital to its success, the behind-the-scenes challenges also played a crucial role in shaping the final product. One of the most memorable anecdotes from the production involves an unexpected disruption to the shooting schedule. During one of the most important scenes, The entire cast and crew were forced to stop filming when a severe thunderstorm struck the area. The storm was so intense that the entire region lost power, and for several hours, the crew had no choice but to wait out the storm. Rather than allowing this setback to derail the shoot, the filmmakers used this time to refine their approach to the scene. The storm's eerie howling wind and the sudden flashes of lightning outside were incorporated into the scene's atmosphere, making it even more unsettling. It's moments like this that illustrate the film's improvisational spirit, a willingness to embrace the unexpected and turn adversity into creative fuel. Through a combination of technical innovation, creative risk-taking, and an unwavering commitment to bringing the supernatural to life in a grounded, emotional way, Somala emerged as a groundbreaking film. It wasn't just the story or the performances that made it unique. It was the seamless integration of every technical element, from lighting to sound to practical effects, that set it apart from other films in the horror genre. The filmmakers didn't just rely on tried-and-true methods. They pushed the envelope, finding new ways to bring their vision to the screen. And in doing so, they created a film that was as technically accomplished as it was emotionally resonant. The technical achievements of Somala didn't just elevate the horror. They enhanced the storytelling, creating an experience that was deeply immersive, unsettling, and unforgettable. In the complex world of Somala, horror isn't just about supernatural forces. It's a mirror reflecting the deepest fears and struggles of the characters, often echoing real-world societal and cultural anxieties. The film weaves a rich tapestry of themes and symbolism, creating a story that resonates on a deeper level, beyond mere frights and thrills. As we journey through the haunting tale of Solastri, Kamala, and their battle against forces both within and beyond their understanding, we see not only an exploration of personal loss and transformation, but also a profound commentary on societal pressures, generational trauma, and the delicate balance between human agency and fate. One of the most apparent and powerful themes in Somala is the destruction of innocence. This is personified in the character of Kamala, whose transition from a bright and innocent child to the vessel of a dark, supernatural force serves as the film's central metaphor. Her possession isn't just the loss of her body to an evil spirit. It's the literal and symbolic erasure of the purity that childhood represents. Kamala's transformation parallels the destruction of innocence in a world that is often too cruel, too unforgiving. The quiet, almost imperceptible shift from an innocent child to something unrecognizable mirrors the gradual loss of innocence that happens as we grow older and are exposed to the harsh realities of life. But this loss of innocence doesn't just apply to Kamala. It's a recurring theme throughout the film, starting with the house itself. The once beautiful home, now crumbling and decaying, reflects the degradation of the family unit. The house's slow decline acts as a visual metaphor for the psychological and emotional breakdown of its inhabitants. As Kamala's possession deepens, so too does the unraveling of the family, particularly Solastri's growing sense of powerlessness. This destruction is slow, inevitable, and tragically irreversible, suggesting that once innocence is lost, it cannot be reclaimed. The film asks a difficult question. When something is broken, can it ever truly be fixed, or is it forever scarred? Solastri's emotional and psychological journey forms the heart of the film's exploration of guilt and responsibility. From the moment Kamala begins to show signs of possession, Solastri is faced with a profound internal struggle. She is both the protector and the cause of her daughter's suffering. On one hand, she is trying to fight against the supernatural force taking over Kamala, but on the other, she is also confronted with the realization that the tragedy unfolding before her is a direct consequence of her past decisions. This duality is best exemplified in the scene where Solastri confronts Kamala, torn between the desperate desire to save her daughter and the growing awareness that she is too late. This moment is steeped in the idea of guilt and the burden of responsibility, as Solastri must come to terms with the fact that the events happening are beyond her control, but still tied to the choices she made years ago. This guilt is amplified by the film's subtle but powerful commentary on generational trauma. It's revealed in flashbacks that Solastri's own mother had a similar experience, where she, too, was unable to save a child from supernatural forces. This cyclical nature of trauma, where the pain and mistakes of one generation reverberate into the next, is a theme that resonates deeply throughout Somala. The possession of Kamala is not an isolated event. It is part of a larger pattern of destructive patterns being passed down through generations, much like an inherited curse. Salastri's inability to break free from this cycle of tragedy mirrors the struggles many individuals face when trying to escape the burdens of their family's past. The film paints a portrait of a family bound by invisible chains, caught in a never-ending loop of pain and despair that seems impossible to escape. While Somala touches on these deeply personal themes, it also addresses broader societal issues, particularly the pressures placed on women and mothers. Salastri's struggle is not just personal. It is also a reflection of the societal expectations placed on her as a mother and wife. She is expected to be strong, to keep the family together, to protect her children at all costs. But as the supernatural forces begin to consume Kamala, Salastri is forced to confront her own limitations. The film subtly critiques the unrealistic expectations society places on women to be perfect caregivers, protectors, and nurturers. In her desperate attempts to save Kamala, Salastri is forced to confront the fact that no matter how hard she tries, some things are beyond her control. This is not just a personal failing, but a commentary on how societal pressures can isolate and wear down women, particularly mothers, who are often expected to sacrifice everything for their families. Somala asks, when the weight of societal expectations becomes too much, what happens to the person carrying them? The symbolism embedded in the film further reinforces these ideas. The supernatural forces at play in Somala are not just external threats. They serve as symbols for the internal struggles of the characters. The demon that possesses Kamala is not merely a villain in the traditional sense. It represents the creeping, corrosive effects of guilt, regret, and fear. It is the embodiment of the character's unresolved emotional baggage. The demon's slow takeover of Kamala is mirrored by the way that these unresolved issues gradually consume the family. The more Salastri tries to fight against the demon, the more she is reminded of her past mistakes, particularly the choices she made regarding Kamala's upbringing. The demon is not an outside force. It is a reflection of her own inner turmoil. This idea is reinforced by the film's use of mirror imagery. Often, when Salastri confronts Kamala, she does so in front of a mirror, symbolizing the reflection of herself that she can't escape. This cyclical nature of guilt and self-loathing underscores the idea that we are often haunted by our own choices, our own mistakes, and the ghosts of our past. Another recurring symbol in the film is the house itself, which serves as both a physical and psychological prison for the characters. The crumbling structure is symbolic of a fractured mind, its decay representing the slow unraveling of the family's emotional and mental stability. As the supernatural forces grow stronger, the house becomes more oppressive, suffocating the characters and trapping them in their own fears and regrets. The house also reflects the societal pressures that suffocate the characters. Salastri is trapped in her role as a mother, unable to break free from the expectations that are placed on her, while Kamala, too, is trapped by her possession, unable to escape the fate that has been thrust upon her. The house represents the narrow boundaries in which these characters are forced to operate, mirroring the limited agency women and mothers often have in the face of overwhelming societal pressures. The film also subtly addresses the tension between tradition and modernity, particularly in its exploration of the supernatural. While Salastri seeks help from modern religious authorities, it is clear that there is an undercurrent of traditional beliefs that still shape the character's understanding of the world. The supernatural forces in Somala are not easily explained by modern science or rational thinking. They are deeply rooted in cultural and spiritual traditions. This clash between the old and the new becomes a source of tension within the story, as Salastri navigates her own beliefs while trying to protect her daughter. The film doesn't necessarily offer a clear answer as to which worldview is right. Instead, it leaves the audience to grapple with the complex intersection of tradition, faith, and personal belief. This tension reflects a larger societal shift, one where traditional ways of understanding the world are increasingly being challenged by modern ideas, leaving individuals to find their own balance between the two. Ultimately, Somala is a deeply layered film that uses its supernatural elements to reflect on the human condition. Its themes of innocence lost, generational trauma, and the struggles of women in society are woven seamlessly into the narrative, creating a story that is both emotionally resonant and thought-provoking. The film's use of symbolism, particularly the demon, the house, and the mirrors, reinforces its deeper messages, offering a rich tapestry of meaning that invites reflection long after the credits roll. As we watch the characters confront their worst fears, we are forced to confront our own, our guilt, our regrets, and the invisible forces that shape our lives. Somala is not just a horror film. It's a meditation on the complexities of the human experience and the shadows that follow us, even when we try to escape them. In Somala, every frame tells a story. The film's visual style is a masterclass in how cinematography, editing, sound design, and music can work in tandem to create an experience that is both immersive and haunting. Director Satya Indra understood that in order to evoke a sense of dread and unease, every element of the film needed to be carefully crafted and meticulously executed. The movie's atmosphere is built not just on its narrative or performances, but also on the seamless blending of visual techniques and soundscapes that pull the audience into the unsettling world of the characters. The first thing you'll notice when watching Somala is the way the camera moves. Deliberate, measured, and often lingering on spaces just long enough to make you feel uncomfortable. Cinematographer Hendra Anwar employs a visual language that emphasizes stillness and quiet tension, allowing the audience to experience the character's fear as though it's their own. One of the most striking aspects of the cinematography is the use of long takes, where the camera lingers on a character, a room, or a detail for just long enough that the audience feels like they are part of the scene. In horror, timing is everything, and these long, drawn-out moments create a creeping sense of discomfort, making the audience anticipate what might happen next, while simultaneously keeping them suspended in a moment of stillness that heightens the tension. There's a scene early in the film where Salastri walks down a narrow hallway, searching for Kamala. The hallway is dimly lit, shadows stretching long across the walls, and the camera slowly tracks her as she moves forward, never cutting away. The audience is made to feel like they are walking beside her, feeling the weight of every step. The camera itself seems to become a character, breathing in the same air as Salastri, pulling the viewer deeper into the eerie atmosphere. This technique is used frequently throughout the film, reinforcing the idea that the characters are not just navigating a physical space, but are also trapped within an emotional and psychological landscape. This approach to cinematography forces the viewer to experience the tension and fear firsthand, rather than simply observing it from a distance. The decision to shoot much of the film in natural light is another defining characteristic of its visual style. The lighting is often muted, with an emphasis on shadows and contrasts. This creates a sense of realism that is unsettling in a horror film, as it grounds the supernatural elements in a very tangible, lived-in world. In particular, the house that serves as the film's primary location is bathed in soft, natural light during the day, but as night falls, the lighting becomes harsh and stark, casting long shadows that seem to stretch out across the walls like reaching fingers. This shift between the warm, inviting daylight and the cold, oppressive nighttime lighting is symbolic of the tension between safety and danger, between the illusion of normalcy and the terrifying truth that lies beneath the surface. But it's not just the lighting that shapes the film's atmosphere. It's the way Anwar uses color. The palette is restrained, dominated by earth tones and muted shades of gray, browns, and greens, reflecting the decaying state of the house and the inner turmoil of the characters. This lack of vibrant color lends the film a bleak, almost desaturated quality, making every burst of color stand out as a moment of heightened significance. One of the most striking uses of color comes during the climactic scene where Kamala, fully possessed, confronts her mother. The scene is bathed in harsh, fluorescent light, and the bright, unnatural tones highlight the surreal horror of the moment. The intensity of the lighting, coupled with the stark contrasts, creates a jarring, nightmarish effect that heightens the emotional and psychological stakes. But Somala isn't simply about shadows and lighting. It's also about what the camera chooses to focus on. A significant stylistic choice that Indra employs throughout the film is the deliberate framing of characters within tight, claustrophobic spaces. Whether it's a shot of Salastri standing in front of a door or a close-up of Kamala's face, often half hidden in shadow, The camera constantly forces the audience to focus on the details of the characters' expressions and the spaces they inhabit. This adds an additional layer of tension, as the audience feels trapped within the frame alongside the characters, unable to escape the fear and paranoia that builds with each passing second. Another unique aspect of the film's cinematography is its frequent use of reflection and mirrors. These reflective surfaces are employed as a motif throughout the film, representing the duality between the characters' internal struggles and the external horrors they face. One of the most striking uses of mirrors occurs during the scenes when Salastri is alone with Kamala, often staring at her daughter's reflection in a dark, cracked mirror. The mirror becomes a symbol of the fractured nature of the family, as well as the characters' internal battles. It reflects their fears, their guilt, and the growing sense that they are powerless to stop the dark forces that are taking over. The reflections serve as a constant reminder that the horror isn't just external. It is also something that lies within the characters, waiting to surface. While the film's visual storytelling is undoubtedly impressive, it is the sound design and music that truly elevate the atmosphere. Somala's soundscape is an intricate web of subtle noises, ambient sounds, and eerie effects that work in tandem with the visuals to create a sense of dread that lingers long after the film ends. The sound design is minimalist in its approach, focusing on the quiet, unsettling noises that often go unnoticed in daily life, but which, in the context of the film, become deeply unnerving. The creaking of floorboards, the soft rustling of leaves outside the window, the distant sound of a baby crying. These are the sounds that populate the world of Somala, creating a constant sense of unease. It's not the loud, jarring noises you might expect from a traditional horror film. Instead, it's the subtle, creeping sounds that worm their way into your subconscious, creating a sense that something is always just out of sight, just out of reach. The use of silence is equally powerful. In many horror films, silence is used as a tool for building suspense, but in Somala, it serves a deeper purpose. The moments of stillness, where no sound exists except for the character's breathing or the ambient noise of the environment, are where the true terror lies. The absence of sound creates an eerie void that is filled only by the audience's own anxiety and anticipation. It's during these moments that the supernatural presence in the film feels most real, as if it is waiting just beyond the threshold, watching, listening, and biding its time. Silence heightens the tension, making the eventual eruptions of sound, whether it's a scream, a crash, or the sudden howling of wind, feel all the more jarring and impactful. The film's score, composed by Arif Wikiksono, adds another layer to the sonic landscape of Somala. The music is atmospheric, with a mix of haunting, melodic motifs and dissonant, unsettling sounds that mirror the internal conflicts of the characters. In particular, the score is used to underscore the emotional depth of the film, bringing out the psychological complexity of Salastri's journey. During the quiet, more introspective moments of the film, the score is soft and minimal, with long, drawn-out notes that slowly build in intensity. But as the horror escalates, so too does the music, becoming more chaotic, discordant, and aggressive, reflecting the growing turmoil within the characters. One of the most memorable moments in the film's score comes during the final confrontation between Salastri and Kamala, where the music reaches a fever pitch, mirroring the emotional and psychological breakdown of the characters. The score crescendos in a way that matches the intensity of the visuals, pushing the tension to its breaking point. But even in the most intense moments, the score never overpowers the visuals or the sound design. Instead, it complements and enhances the atmosphere, seamlessly blending with the film's other elements to create a cohesive and immersive experience. Somala also employs a series of stylistic choices that further define the director's vision. Perhaps one of the most notable is the film's pacing, which is deliberate and patient. This slow, methodical build-up creates a sense of inevitability, as if the audience is being led down a path from which there is no escape. The pacing mirrors the film's themes of entrapment, both physical and psychological, as the characters are slowly drawn into a web of fear and uncertainty. This approach allows the horror to build gradually, intensifying the sense of dread over time, until the final moments of the film, when everything erupts in a terrifying climax. In terms of editing, Indra and editor Adi Satya employ a technique of slow transitions between scenes, often holding on a single shot for an extended period before cutting away. This allows the tension to linger, giving the audience time to absorb the emotional weight of each scene. The transitions between reality and nightmare are fluid, and often the line between the two becomes increasingly blurred. The editing reflects the characters' fractured states of mind, as they begin to lose their grip on reality and are drawn further into the supernatural chaos that surrounds them. The smoothness of the transitions, combined with the lack of sharp cuts, adds to the film's dreamlike, disorienting quality, heightening the sense that everything is spiraling out of control. By weaving together cinematography, sound design, music, and editing, Somala creates a world that feels both intimately familiar and profoundly unsettling. The film's visual and auditory elements are not just tools to tell a story. They are essential parts of the narrative, contributing to the emotional and psychological depth of the film. Every stylistic choice, from the framing of a shot to the subtle use of sound, serves to immerse the audience in a world where reality and nightmare collide, and where fear is not just something that happens to the characters, but something that becomes an intrinsic part of their existence. Through these techniques, Somala isn't just a horror film. It's an experience, a journey into the heart of darkness that lingers long after the screen fades to black. ChatGPT said, "In Somala, the chemistry between the cast is not just an added bonus. It is the lifeblood of the film, driving its emotional core and drawing viewers into the intricate dynamics of its characters." The relationship between Salastri and Kamala forms the emotional backbone of the film, and the actors' performances, supported by their chemistry, elevate the narrative to a deeply immersive experience. What makes the relationship between the characters so compelling is the raw vulnerability and tension that both Dewey Larasati and Raka Putra bring to their roles. Their interactions, whether in moments of tenderness or terror, speak volumes, showing that the deepest emotional conflicts often lie not just in external forces, but in the complex undercurrents of familial bonds. Dewey Larasati, who portrays the mother Salastri, and Raka Putra, who plays the daughter Kamala, share an undeniable connection on screen that feels both genuine and palpable. In their quieter moments, their characters share a tenderness that contrasts sharply with the supernatural horror lurking beneath the surface. The subtle shifts in their expressions, the way they interact with one another, whether in love or fear, create a natural rhythm that draws the audience into their lives. There's a quiet intensity in Salastri's protective nature toward Kamala, as well as a deep sadness that permeates her every action. Meanwhile, Raka Putra's portrayal of Kamala transitions seamlessly from innocence to something darker, capturing the duality of her character without overt dramatization. The magic of their performances lies in how effortlessly they navigate the emotional spectrum of the film. When Salastri's desperate attempts to save her daughter unfold, Larasati's nuanced performance conveys the overwhelming weight of guilt and powerlessness that a mother feels when she sees her child slipping away. Meanwhile, Putra's portrayal of Kamala, especially as her possession deepens, conveys a chilling emotional detachment that makes her both a victim and a villain. It's an interplay between love, fear, and helplessness, where every look, every word, and every action feels charged with tension. This chemistry is further amplified by Indra's direction, which allows these emotional moments to unfold slowly, giving the audience time to process the magnitude of the bond between the two women. The raw, unspoken pain between Salastri and Kamala is what keeps the audience emotionally invested as the supernatural horrors escalate. Supporting cast members like Alika Sari and Anwar Duma also play crucial roles in shaping the dynamics of the film, especially in moments when the stakes are high. Sari's portrayal of the family's older relative, who is caught in the web of the family's dark history, adds a sense of depth and tradition to the narrative. Duma's role as the local religious figure who offers advice and guidance adds a layer of skepticism and wisdom, providing the characters with a moral compass in an increasingly chaotic world. Their performances, though more subdued compared to the main characters, still carry significant weight, particularly in how they react to the unfolding horror. They serve as anchors, representing different facets of the broader themes of tradition versus modernity, spirituality versus skepticism, and the struggle between fate and personal agency. Behind the scenes, the preparation for these roles was just as intense as the final product. Both Larasati and Putra immersed themselves in their characters, spending time with psychologists to better understand the psychological effects of grief and trauma. In particular, Putra worked closely with a dialect coach to fine-tune the increasingly unsettling way Kamala's voice and movements change as her possession progresses. This attention to detail was essential in making the supernatural elements of the film feel grounded and human. The tension between the characters was not just a result of acting but of real emotional investment and understanding that was cultivated off-screen. In interviews, Larasati has spoken about how she often found herself in tears after particularly intense scenes with Putra, as the emotional weight of their relationship became almost too overwhelming to bear. The setting itself played an equally critical role in shaping the performances. The film's primary location, an old, crumbling house, serves not only as a physical space but as a reflection of the characters' psychological and emotional states. The house is a character in itself, a crumbling structure full of hidden memories, whispers of the past, and shadows of regret. The cast and crew spent days rehearsing within the actual house used for filming, which was an ancient, weathered building on the outskirts of a rural town. The atmosphere was so thick with history and decay that it became impossible to ignore the feeling of being in a place where time had stopped, where the walls themselves seemed to hold secrets. This immersion into the physical location informed the cast's understanding of their characters and allowed them to tap into a visceral sense of confinement and isolation. The house, though decrepit, was deliberately designed to reflect the emotional fragmentation of the family. The rooms were deliberately sparse, with little to distract from the stark, oppressive walls, and the spaces between characters felt larger than they actually were. This physical distance between Salastri and Kamala during the more emotionally charged scenes mirrored their internal distances, the inability to truly reach each other, even when they were in the same room. The setting became a constant reminder of the family's fractured state, and the tension in the characters' relationships was constantly amplified by the haunting physicality of their environment. The film's visual style, which employs long takes and close-up shots, was also enhanced by this setting, as the characters would often be framed within tight spaces that highlighted their emotional isolation. In terms of audience reaction, Somala generated a wave of both critical and fan attention. Upon its release on the 15th of March 2024, it quickly became one of the most talked-about films in the horror genre. Critics praised the film for its unique blend of supernatural horror and psychological depth, applauding the way it subverted typical genre conventions. While many horror films rely on jump scares and violence to elicit fear, Somala takes a more restrained, methodical approach, relying heavily on atmosphere and character development. The slow-building tension and the emotional core of the film resonated with critics, many of whom described it as a masterclass in creating unease without relying on traditional horror tropes. The film also garnered praise for its performances, especially those of Larasati and Putra. Critics noted how their dynamic shifted from one of maternal tenderness to one of tragic inevitability as Kamala's possession deepened. The emotional authenticity that the actors brought to their roles gave Somala a depth rarely seen in horror films. Larasati, in particular, was lauded for her portrayal of a mother who was pushed to the brink by both supernatural and emotional forces. Her nuanced performance was noted for conveying a deep well of internal conflict, making her character both relatable and heart-wrenching. Fan reactions were equally enthusiastic, with Somala quickly building a devoted following. Many fans praised the film for its originality and its ability to make horror feel personal and intimate rather than spectacle-driven. There was a particular fascination with the film's exploration of generational trauma, with fans discussing how the themes resonated with their own family histories. The subtle but impactful use of symbolism, such as the recurring motif of mirrors and reflections, sparked countless online discussions and interpretations. Fans of the film created theories about the deeper meaning behind the demon's possession of Kamala, with some suggesting it represented the cyclical nature of family trauma, while others interpreted it as a metaphor for the pressures of motherhood. Social media platforms were abuzz with analysis videos, fan art, and fan theories, with many fans returning to the film multiple times to uncover hidden details. The film's slower, more atmospheric pacing, coupled with its powerful performances, made it a film that demanded deeper engagement, encouraging repeated viewings and discussions. The haunting imagery and emotionally charged performances lingered long after the credits rolled, prompting viewers to reflect on the family dynamics and the horror that simmered beneath the surface. In the long term, Somala found a place in the broader cultural conversation, becoming a touchstone for those looking for horror films that went beyond surface-level scares. It was lauded for being a perfect example of how horror can tackle deeper themes while still providing the chills and thrills that audiences crave. Its success proved that a film's ability to engage emotionally with viewers was just as important as its ability to frighten. Somala proved that horror, when done, complexities of their characters' emotional journeys is what gives the film its soul. Every glance, every whispered line of dialogue, every subtle shift in body language conveys the weight of their inner turmoil and the depth of their love for one another. These performances elevate Somala beyond a mere supernatural horror film and into a profound meditation on family, loss, and the lengths we will go to for the ones we love. The supporting cast, including Alika Sari and Anwar Duma, also play pivotal roles in bringing the film's world to life. Their grounded performances serve as anchors to the increasingly tense and supernatural events unfolding around them. While Salastri and Kamala may take center stage, the film's secondary characters provide critical emotional depth and thematic resonance. Sari's portrayal of the family's elder relative adds a layer of tradition and history, while Duma's role as the local religious figure represents the clash between skepticism and belief in the supernatural. These characters help to balance the narrative and further emphasize the larger themes of faith, doubt, and the unknown. What truly sets Somala apart, however, is its lasting cultural impact. The film has become more than just a horror film. It has become a cultural phenomenon, inspiring discussions, theories, and even a new generation of filmmakers who want to delve deeper into the emotional and psychological aspects of horror. Somala's success has paved the way for a new era of horror, where filmmakers are encouraged to experiment with form, structure, and content, prioritizing emotional depth and intellectual engagement over surface-level thrills. In many ways, Somala has become the benchmark for the genre, proving that horror can be a vehicle for artistic expression that challenges audiences and pushes boundaries. It has inspired countless films that follow in its wake, offering an enduring blueprint for the future of horror cinema. The film's critical acclaim and widespread fanbase are a testament to its lasting legacy. It has won numerous awards for its performances, direction, and technical achievements, and has been celebrated by both critics and audiences alike for its innovative storytelling. Somala's influence extends far beyond the silver screen, having sparked online communities of fans who eagerly engage with its complex themes and symbolic imagery. Its exploration of family trauma, generational curses, and the supernatural has resonated with a broad spectrum of viewers, sparking conversations that go well beyond the realm of traditional horror discussions. However, what truly cements Somala's place in cinematic history is the way it has managed to endure in the public consciousness. It is a film that stays with you long after the final scene fades. It is a film that demands to be rewatched, analyzed, and discussed. It's a film that leaves behind a lingering unease, not because of the monsters or the supernatural forces it depicts, but because of the emotional truths it unveils. At its core, Somala is a story about the human experience. The pain of losing someone you love, the fear of confronting your deepest fears, and the lengths we go to in order to protect those we hold dear. It is this raw, universal emotion that gives the film its lasting power. As we reflect on Somala's impact, it is clear that its influence will continue to be felt for years to come. Its haunting visuals, compelling characters, and emotional depth have made it a modern classic, one that will be remembered as a pivotal moment in the evolution of horror cinema. For those who have yet to experience its haunting beauty, Somala remains a must-watch, a film that will forever alter the way you think about horror and the stories it can tell. It is a film that stays with you, not because of the scares, but because of the people it makes you care about and the emotional truths it exposes. As we close out this deep dive into the world of Somala, it's clear that this film is not just a fleeting phenomenon. It's a lasting cultural touchstone. It's a film that has reshaped what horror can be and has raised the bar for future films in the genre. But the journey doesn't end here. If you love this breakdown, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of cinema. Let's keep exploring movies together and uncovering the magic that makes them unforgettable. Until next time, keep watching, keep reflecting, and keep experiencing the art of film.